4 o'clock, and I want to start on time. And if not, Carol will get on me up here. So we'll start on time. And welcome. You made it through the snow. This in a normal year, this snow would have been just a dusting. And this year, when we've not had any snow, it's a major snowfall. So welcome. It's good to be here. I've enjoyed the 3 classes these 3 classes to be able to talk through this. So let's bow in prayer, and then we'll jump in. Lord, we give you thanks for just the safety and the warm place to be able to come and to learn and discuss and pray. And we just thank you for your presence, and we pray your blessing upon this time that we have here. Guide our conversations, guide our thoughts. Be with your church, O Lord, as we seek to serve you and to allow others to come to know your grace. We love you, Lord, and we pray your blessing this day. Amen. All right, this is the 3rd week, and if we can have some help passing those out. This is our 3rd week. If you remember, the first week was Methodist history. The last week was Methodist theology. This week is what's the future look like? I've called it different things, so I forget what I've actually called it, but it's what's the future look like? Where are we going? That kind of thing. As we're passing out the document, and this is really just an outline, just so you can take notes if you want to take notes, that kind of thing. What I want to be able to say is I know, and we are going to spend time talking about the current reality and the current argument and all of that going on in the Methodist Church, but I also want to say that I think the current issue is distracting us from several other issues that I think are essential for us to look at in the future of the church. So I want to be able to spend some time talking about those other issues as well as our current reality. The second thing that I want to say is one of the issues that we all are aware of that with the splitting of the denomination and all of that is around human sexuality. And I want to have an understanding here that we're not debating human sexuality today. We're not going to have an answer to LGBTQ and what the Bible says and all that. What we're dealing with is what's the future of the church going to look like, and how do we sort through that, and how do we move forward, and what's it going to look like that way. And we could spend, if we want to have that conversation around the LGBTQ issues and all of that and human sexuality, that it's a valid conversation, but I think it's different than what ours is today. Does that, are we all aboard on that one, all right? So where we're at, I want to start with the background and understanding of our current reality. We need to be able to deal with the current reality, and there's a lot of information that's out there. I don't know what you've heard. I don't know what you've been told. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. And so what I'm going to be saying, I don't think this has to be, this is not rocket science, what my next statement is. This is my opinion. And so some of this is fact, some of it is opinion, some of it's from my experience as being on cabinet and all of that kind of stuff. So just realize that. And I try to be as objective as possible as we go forward that way. But the question is, what does the future of the church look like? We are facing a time in our denomination in United Methodism right now that is affecting many, many people. And there are churches in our own conference. We've had about 80 churches vote to disaffiliate, and we'll talk about that. At the first round at our special called annual conference last November, there's more that are going through the process. It probably is going to be somewhere around 15%. That's 80 out of 900 in some churches. And so we can see that. But let's get a brief hit just to understand. We've talked about some of this, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that. The language that's in the discipline right now, that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, came into existence in 1972 at the 1972 General Conference. It was towards the end of General Conference. It was one of the last actions taken at that General Conference, and it was inserted into the book of discipline. And because it was incompatible with Christian teaching, we would not be able to marry same-gender couples, or we would not ordain any self-avowed practicing homosexual. And that's the language, self-avowed practicing homosexual. Ever since that year of 1972, every 4 years there's been a general conference up until 2020, when there wasn't. But every 4 years there's been a general conference, and every 4 years it's been debated and changed and legislated and all of that. And if anything, over those years from 1972 up until our last general conference in 2019, the language in the discipline has become more restrictive, and the punishments have become more. It's become more conservative in terms of the language of the discipline. The issue many people are having is not so much on what the discipline says, it's in the enforcement of the rules. Many people are saying, on the conservative side of the church, are saying that the bishops are not enforcing it equally and that kind of thing. It had built to the point in 2016 that at the General Conference in 2016, the denomination almost split on the floor of General Conference. It came very close to splitting. I don't know what that would have looked like. It would have been even more chaos than we're seeing today. And so it was negotiated at that time that we would have a special general conference called by the Council of Bishops. There would be a special general conference called between 2016 and 2020 to deal solely with the issues that were dividing us around human sexuality. That general conference happened in 2019 in St. Louis. I went out for that general conference, and it was a painful thing. I mean, it took me several weeks to get over it. The body of Christ was not being exhibited at that general conference. It was just plain ugly at that point. What had happened before that is that there was a plan that was negotiated called the One Church Plan. It went down to defeat. It opened it up for debate. The language at 2019 became even more. It focused on punishment. It focused on pastors who would do a same-gender service or any of that there would be automatic removals and all of that. From that point on, it just blew up. The progressive side was saying that this is a justice issue. The evangelical side was saying it's a biblical authority issue. And it went back and forth. Since that time, there was a negotiated settlement between a group of evangelical groups, the Confessing Movement, the Good News Movement, and the Institute for Religion and Democracy, IRD. The IRD got its founding back in, remember the days down in Nicaragua of the Sandinistas and all of that? The IRD started down there to fight communism. And it was a very conservative group, and when their mission on that, they turned their attention to be able to go into the church, and they had the stated objective at that point to enter into the mainline denominations and debate and to impact the current conversation in all of the mainline denominations, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Presbyterian, all of the mainline denominations. So the IRD, Good News, and Confessing Movement, and Wesley Covenant Association all gathered together, and they made plans and to form a new denomination called the Global Methodists. And they began to negotiate with, there was a committee or a team set up to try to negotiate a settlement between the sides and to bring that to General Conference for a vote in 2020. They had negotiated, there was a plan that they had all signed on to, that if it were approved at General Conference, then it would have been settled, the new denomination would form, there would be a chunk of money, I think it was $20 million would be given to that church to start, and so forth and so on. Um, back up at 2019, I forgot this piece. In the 2019 General Conference, at the very end of that General Conference, a recommendation was approved on an exit plan to get out of the denomination if churches or pastors were in disagreement with the way the rules were being enforced or the rules themselves. And it became known as paragraph 2553. And paragraph 2553 gives a plan for disaffiliation for those churches, and we'll talk about what the requirements are of that. So then this group that had negotiated the settlement and everything else had made a proposal, and I forget exactly what it was called, but made a proposal that was going to come up in 2020 at the General Conference up in Minnesota, but we all know what happened in 2020. COVID hit, General Conference was postponed, not just once. It was supposed to be done in 2022. It was postponed there. They said, and finally they've come out and said it would be in 2024. The reason it was postponed most recently is not so much because of COVID here in the United States, but it was because of the delegations in the continent of Africa. And if you remember what we talked about, Africa is the fastest growing segment of United Methodism right now. And they're soon going to become the majority of members in the continent of Africa. And what they found and what our embassies were telling them is that the visa applications to come over, from example, the Congo, was going to take them between 250 and 300 days. To be able to be approved. That's our embassies tell you. And so there just was not time to be able to get the delegates from Africa over to the United States. And so the decision was made to postpone it, and it would be in 2024. If you are a legislative wonk, there are all kinds of issues that brings up, like who the delegates are. Is it the delegates that were elected for 2020, or do you have to elect new delegates, and all of that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, in the midst of that, once the postponements were announced, the Global Methodist Church decided, those who were forming the Global Methodist Church decided they could no longer wait. They just couldn't wait any longer. In May of 2022, I think it was May of 2022, the Global Methodist Church, or the GMC, was kicked off and was formed. And from that time on, they were able, because they had formed, at least opened up the denomination, they would be able to accept churches and pastors into the Global Methodist Church. What the rules they have not been set. They've not had an organizing general conference. Their book of discipline is not set yet, or any of that. They're still in the organization process. And so that prompted the conversations that we have. And that the paragraph 2553 is what our bishop has said, that if there are churches who are wishing to disaffiliate at this point, that we are following the rules of 2553, which was enacted in 2019 General Conference. It's our standing discipline in doing that. And again, I'll talk about what the requirements of that are in that. So that's kind of where we are at. Since that time, there have been a wave of churches discerning and charting their path forward, and there have been, like I said, 80 have already been approved. Only 4 in the Maumee Watershed District have been approved to disaffiliate. 4 out of 100 and something. I don't remember how many churches we have. Other districts are hit much harder. A lot of the districts that are rural districts are getting hit very hard. My old district, Northwest Plains, have had a lot of the small churches are choosing to disaffiliate at that point. But it's only, so far as of November, it's only 80 out of 900 only. It's 80 out of 950, 960 churches. So right around 8% have been at this point. Fortunately, I'm not privy to how many others are in the wave. I've heard that the bishop has said he thinks that at the summer annual conference there may be another 50. So we may end up with 130 to 150 that would disaffiliate out of that 950 originally that way. Now, in the requirements for disaffiliation, according to paragraph 2553, and I'm sorry to use the United Methodist, the language and all of that, but it's the clearest way of doing it. Paragraph 2553 that puts out three major things that you have to meet for disaffiliation. The first is there has to be a 2/3 majority of a church conference vote. Now, in our system, there is a church conference and there are charge conferences. Charge conferences are the leaders of the church, the elected leaders of the church. A charge conference, elected leaders. A church conference is any member in good standing that is present at the meeting. The rules that are laid out in the discipline have long been followed. You have to announce it 10 days ahead of time by 2 different methods, and there's no absentee ballots, there's no proxy ballots, there's no, it has to be present at the meeting to cast a vote. And you need 2/3 majority to approve disaffiliation to be able to do it. The second is that the church would have to pay their portion of the unfunded pension liability. What that is our pension organization called Westpath is the ones who administer that, and they have an unfunded pension liability is if it's the amount of money needed to fund all the pensions of those who are retired. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this because I can go as deep as you want to on this, but I'll wonk out on it. You don't need to have all that. We have several different changes in pension. I remember when I first entered, and right before, it's right about that time it changed. The original pension of United Methodist pastors is every year at annual conference, the conference would vote the amount of money per year of service that the retired pastors would get. So it would be an annual conference vote. They wouldn't know what they were going to get until annual conference. And so it was so many dollars and cents per service year, and then the retirees would go. And I can remember at those annual conference, all the retirees, that would be the only meeting they would come to, the annual conference, is that one meeting, and they would vote on it. And then it changed, and now it's more like a regular IRA, and like any other pension fund, is the church puts in it directly, we put into it directly. Ours are less affected. It's the unfunded pension liability, is the covering the amount of money that has been promised to the retirees that have served these churches, and if the church is left, then all of a sudden there would be a hole in the pension liabilities. And so Westpath gives to each annual conference what the conference portion is, and then the conference divides that among all of the churches and saying, so if you want to disaffiliate, this is your portion of the unfunded pension liability that has been approved on that. It depends, they're using the apportionment formula, so it depends on how much money we spend on ourselves and our membership and all of that kind of thing. So the larger churches would owe more, the smaller churches would owe less. And then the last requirement for disaffiliation is that there would be 2 years of apportionments. Now, our church has been paying apportionments, so that would not be a big thing. But it's 2 years, the year before and the year after disaffiliation, that would be that you would have to pay. And then there's the rules that if you've received a grant of over $20,000 in the last 5 years, that would need to be repaid to the conference. But that's not a widely utilized thing on that. And so those are the requirements for that. Now, the challenge to that is 2/3 majority is a pretty high bar to achieve. And one of the things the churches have to really assess is, can we achieve that 2/3 majority? Because if 2/3, 66%, 66.6%, I don't know what the 0.6% would be, but that's the 2/3. If the church, just imagine the difficulty would be is if you had a church conference, were pushing to disaffiliate, you got 64%. I mean, what do you do at that point? You have almost 2/3 who are wanting to disaffiliate, but it's not to meet the requirement. You have split the church wide open at that point. And probably you will weaken the church because the ones who lost, and anytime you vote, there's winners and there are losers. And so the losers would probably end up leaving. We've seen it in our conference already a couple places, is that those who lost, one church, those who lost left and went down the block and started their own church. So there's anecdotal stories of that happening. So where our leadership is really trying to look at how do we manage this in a day and age where it's hard to keep the unity of a church anyways. The political climate of our culture has entered into the church. I don't know if you've realized that or not, but our political debate, the way we debate each other, the way we talk about, the way we vilify people that we are opposed to, it's entered the church. Rather than the church influencing the culture has influenced the church. And so we have that standard going on. So as I've been talking to our leadership, and I've talked to our leadership, I've talked to our committees, I've talked to about 150 individuals in small groups in our church, different small groups and different configurations, all that. So I've talked about 150, and this thinking has resonated with all of them. And it's being able to see how do we move forward with our church being as intact as we can do that. As I've talked about, there's language that I have used that I'll explain here. Just some of you have heard this before, others this will be new for, but it's the word compatibilist and non-compatibilist. A non-compatibilist, and there are, if you think of a scale up here, on the extremes, there are, on the ends of the scale, there are non-compatibilists, both conservative or evangelical compatibilists, non-compatibilists, and progressive non-compatibilists. The non-compatibilists are saying that this is how I believe I can't abide by having anybody who differs on this issue. It could be used on a multitude of different issues, but on the human sexuality, the conservative, evangelical, non-compatibilists would say, I believe Scripture says that homosexuality is wrong. I can't be in relationship with any other people in the church that differ from that. And this is my stance, and I need to have that stance. On the progressive side, they would say this is a justice issue, and we can't discriminate. It's not up to us, and all of that. And this is my stance, and I can't abide by it on the other end. So those are the non-compatibilists. In the middle are the compatibilists that will say, both evangelical compatibilists and progressive compatibilists will say, this is how I believe, but I can be in relationship with people who differ from me. You know, that I'm not going to compromise my beliefs, but I can still be in relationship with people who have a different stance on that. And that's how they went forward. As I've been talking to the leaders and the groups that I have talked to, my impression, and it's been affirmed by a vast majority of the people I've talked to, is most of our church here at Maumee United Methodist Church is in that compatibilist range. We're in that range. We're either leaning right or leaning left, but we value being in relationship with people. And remember what I was talking about. United Methodist Church is a big tent. There's a difference of opinions. There's room for those differences, and that's kind of where we're at. So if we are truly in the compatibilist range, and I think it could be and I've not done a study of this, so this is totally my guess. I've said it to some of the leaders, and most of the leaders agree with this. I think we're in the 90% range of our members are in that compatibilist range someplace. If that is true, then I think that getting a 2/3 majority would be very difficult. At best, would be very difficult. Even if there was a push for the church to disaffiliate, I think getting 2/3 majority at this stage would be very difficult for us. And so the next question then is, if we aren't going to get 2/3 majority, do we even vote? Because if we vote and don't get that, then I think we will be dividing the congregation wherever we're at that way. Now, that's not a perfect thing. Because we have lost some people on both ends of the spectrum in the non-compatibilist range. And, we've lost some progressive folks who thinks the church is not going to be ever get to the point of being inclusive enough. We've lost some people on the other end of the spectrum who are saying that we need to be stronger. We need to stand by biblical authority, all of that kind of stuff. And as a pastor, let me tell you, anytime we lose members, it's like getting stabbed in the heart. I hate losing members. It's tough. But I also realize in the culture we're at, that's where we're at. And so the question that we have to ask and answer is, how do we preserve the unity of the church so that we can keep moving forward to focus on the mission and vision of what God has given to us moving forward that way. And so that's kind of where we're at on that. You know, our leaders have been talking about that. You know, as we're doing it, the 2/3 majority is hard. It's hard enough to hold the unity of the church in this time. And it just doesn't make sense to me to run this risk of dividing the church, to affiliate with a new denomination that doesn't even have their rules set yet. You know, one of the problems I see with the churches that are leaving, they're running the risk, and I'm not demonizing them. I have good friends. This is so hard because I have friends who are leaving that I've been in ministry with for my whole career. I know churches that I was district superintendent of, and I built relationships. So I grieve this, but you know, how do we? Does it make sense to leave the denomination, even if it's not perfect, which we're not, but no denomination is going to be perfect? Does it make sense to leave, to go where the rules are not set, and they say, here's the projected rules. That's great, but we all know that when they have their convening general conference, those rules could all change. I'm not saying they will, but they could. And so, to me, it makes sense to wait and see until the rules are established, and then some church, then it's better able to make some decisions going that way there. One of the attractive things of the Global Methodists is their apportionment costs are going to be lower than what it is in the United Methodist Church. Again, I think that's a mistake to think it's always going to be that way. I think when the denomination starts functioning and they're going to have to start paying bishops and their structures and all of that stuff, the costs will go up. And so there's a lot that way. At this point, I know in the Global Methodist Church, there just are not enough pastors to go around. Down north of Kenton, in Walnut Grove, United Methodist Church, literally in the middle of a cornfield, is a large church. They're getting, large. They're getting 150, 175 people a Sunday. That church voted to disaffiliate. Their pastor is not. Their pastor is now been moved up to Continental in a church that is remaining United Methodist, and the Walnut Grove is left without a pastor. And the Global Methodists don't have enough pastors for a church that size yet. I'm not saying it will never, but yet they don't. And so they have a pastor driving up from Columbus to preach. It's Brian Straub. Though, you all know Brian Straub. Brian is driving up from Columbus. I think it's Columbus, from maybe even south of Columbus. I forget where he retired to. But from Columbus to north of Kenton, between Kenton and the metropolis of Dunkirk, Ohio, if you remember where Dunkirk is, it's between there, to preach every week. And so the church is going to struggle without a pastor, because he's not going to be there. He's there on weekends. He's there on Sundays to preach, and that's all that can happen at that point. So there's a lot of transitions that way, and we really don't know yet what's going to happen with the United Methodist Church. A lot is going to be determined at the 2024 General Conference that's coming up. So there's a lot that has yet to be determined. And so one of the things that I also want to address just some of the misinformation, and I've heard this, I've seen documents that are being mailed out from churches that are disaffiliating, trying to line up other churches. I don't know if any of you have received any of these mailings or not, but there are emails going out where it's saying that every United Methodist Church has to vote. No, it doesn't. We don't have to vote on this. If we are all right remaining United Methodist, we do not have to take a vote on this. The only time you have to vote is if you are wanting to disaffiliate, and if enough people are wanting to disaffiliate. There's another one saying that every United Methodist Church will be forced to accept a gay pastor or forced to do same-gender services. No, we're not. I know for a fact that our cabinet takes great pains in doing that and are not going to force those kind of appointments onto churches that they are not willing to work with that. It would be cruel to the pastor, it'd be cruel to the church, and there is nothing indicating that churches will be forced to do anything that is against our own values and our own beliefs. I know right now I have the authority. I can turn down any wedding that I want to turn down. The pastor can turn it down without having justification, and I have. Over the years, I've turned down some couples that I've met. One couple I know, I met with them, and it was a train wreck as I did the pre-marriage counseling with them, and my commitment to them is saying that I will give to you the red flags. I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I will share any red flags that I have, and I went through, and there were just so many red flags in this. And I gave it to him. I said, my recommendation is that you not get married right now. My prediction is, and I say I don't take this lightly, and I don't do this often. My prediction is that within a couple months you'll be divorced. Now they got mad at that, but I don't know why. But they got mad at it, and they backed away and didn't come to the church. And I found out they went to a neighboring church, got married, and within 3 months they were divorced. I don't celebrate that at all. But we have the authority to be able to choose who we marry and who we don't marry. Another thing that is being said in the circles and the emails going out is that the United Methodist Church is going to desert Orthodox Christian theology. Our theological writings in the Book of Discipline, that beginning part of the Book of Discipline is set. That is never going to change. It's not allowed to change. I mean, all of the debating and legislating is on the rules that come after that. The theological convictions will not change. Our Orthodox Christian beliefs will not change. As long as I'm preaching in the church, my church is going to hear of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to hear of the Holy Spirit needing to move among us. We'll hear about our need for a commitment to Jesus Christ and to accept the grace of God. I'm about as orthodox as they come. And I'm not alone. The pastors I'm sent... What's that? Yeah, maybe even about Nebuchadnezzar. So, and Shadrach, Shack, and Ben. So what we realize is I know many pastors, every pastor I know in the Methodist Church. Now, are there those that push the envelope? Yes. I don't agree with them. But there are those in our denomination pushing the envelope. You know, do we have problems between the jurisdictions, like the Western jurisdiction and the bishops here, and do we have structural issues? Yes, I'm the first one to admit we have all kinds of structural issues that need tended to. But what I've been saying and repeatedly saying is that if we are looking for a pure denomination or a pure church, you're going to be disappointed. There is no such thing as a pure church. And I believe that as we go forward, if our pursuit is to find purity, there is no such thing as purity in churches because we are people. And there is imperfection. Can I say that I will never leave the Methodist Church? No. If they would vote in 2024, they would desert Orthodox Christian belief, I'm out at that point. I mean, I can honestly say that I would be out at that point. But I don't see that happening. You know, I don't think we will be forced to do anything that is against our belief. I think there'll be a push, and I don't know if it will go through. This is where that crystal ball is very cloudy. I think there will be a push to allow pastors who feel led to do it to do gay marriages and same-gender services and all of that. But there's not going to be the force, that we will not be forced to do it that way. I believe that with all my heart on that. So let me pause there. See, so the bottom line, I just lied to you. Let me pause there and then I go on. That's not really the bottom line to me is there is still so much uncertainty. There is so much uncertainty to the new denomination of the Global Methodists. It just doesn't logically make sense to me to push us to divide ourselves to be able to go to something that may be changing radically. It's not set. And with us being, if my assessment of Maumee Methodist Church is correct, and I'm fairly confident in this, that we are in that compatibilist range, I just don't see that we're anywhere near it. I think we have a wide enough scope that 2/3 majority would be a tough bar to achieve at that point. And so my role as pastor is to be able to preserve the unity of the church the best that we can in a time of life that it's tough to preserve the unity of the church. Does that make sense? I mean, that's where I'm coming from. Let's pause for questions. I do want to make sure we have time to talk about some of the other issues, but this is the elephant in the room, I get it. So we have microphones up here. Kelly is not with us, so we're just going to pass the microphones into sections. So we have 2 microphones for each section here, or 1 microphone for this section. So, there you go. And Dave has a question.
Pastor, just with regards to some of the things you said, I want to comment on my experience with other churches, especially in our community. And I'll mention the names because I've been around a long time and selling real estate to almost all these churches in Maumee. As the Lutherans, they had a similar problem. And there was a split. And some of the congregation left the facility and went over to one of the elementary schools and tried to put a second group together, which as far as I know, it didn't work. Then you go to the Presbyterians. They don't operate the same way as our Methodist church does. And I was involved because I know so many there that the search committee would come to me to help them out, not as a member of their church, but to find a pastor and or housing. But they went 3 years looking for a pastor.
Yes.
I mean, that's another element that I just wanted to share, that I've experienced a split with another denomination. I've experienced the hunt, and they had to bring in a retired Presbyterian who lived in a little apartment up here at Conant and Broadway area. But I just wanted to comment as 2 problems that can happen.
And yeah, to me, if the local congregation is split, both parts are weakened in that. So that's it's, and we've seen that we're not the first denomination to go through this. Episcopalians, Lutherans, and Presbyterians have already been through this. I believe the other denominations that have not gone through this yet will go through it. I think it's going to happen. And it probably needs to happen. I think it needs to happen that way. But it will. And I've been challenging those who are Global Methodists who think that taking care, in their words, taking care of this issue is all that they need to worry about, and all of these people are going to swarm back to them. And I said, well, what happens when your kids or grandkids come out as being gay? What are you going to do then that you've excluded them from everything? And they said, well, that's never going to happen. Well, yeah, I said, I think it's an issue that. All I know is splits rarely help, and then if you split, then it sets it up to say the next time we have a disagreement, you'll split again, and it just keeps on going that way. And so, to me, preserving the unity. Now, is it unity at all costs? No, I think there is a time when we'd have to talk, we'd have to work through that. But at this point, I'm not sensing that. Sure.
You talk about like a 2/3 vote. Would that be a special meeting
It would be a
called?
special church conference.
Okay, and it would be 2/3 of the voting members that were in attendance?
Correct. 2/3 of those who were present. And then 2/3 of the members in good standing that are present. Yeah. Members. Yeah. Other questions?
I have a general question.
Sure.
The size of our congregation, yes, Pastor, the size of our congregation of these 900 churches that you're referring to, where do we fall in that?
I've not seen the sizes of all those churches. We've had some, there's a few that are much bigger than us that have left. Anderson Hills down in Cincinnati has left. Trinity Evangelical, I'm pointing like I know where I'm at here. In Upper Sandusky has left. They're about 700. Now these are pre-COVID numbers. I don't know what they're doing after. Anderson Hills was around 1,000 or so a Sunday. So there's some bigger, a lot that are small. A lot of the ones in Northwest Plains, I saw a list of those who are discerning now, going through a discernment process, and a lot of them are getting under 50 people a Sunday. But that's not all. There are some larger and some smaller at that. Yeah.
Now, for churches that are going to split, where are the members getting their information? Enough information to allow them to vote logically?
Yeah, the Global Methodists are very aggressive in sending information out, and there's a website you can go to get information and all of that kind of stuff. But
The church are sitting around playing fiddle, doing very little. They get something in the mailbox that said, "Come join us."
well, my own biasness, and this is my own opinion, and I'll confess it, is I think a majority of the churches that have left have been led by the pastor.
Oh, okay.
That the pastor is leading them out. And I know that many pastors that are leaving have had problems with the United Methodist Church, and human sexuality is not the only issue. It is the lightning rod issue, but it is not they don't trust the bishops, they don't like the itineracy. There's a lot about the Methodist Church structure that they don't like, and they've been wanting to get out. So there's more to it than that, but this is the lightning rod issue that's coalesced that. Yeah. Dave up there?
Maybe two parts to this. The Church of the Cross, I just hear rumors. But a member of the Church of the Cross, and if I get his name right, because I haven't had a contact with him for some time, is an attorney named, I think it's Chris Stein or Chris Steiner, and he's a delegate representing our area.
He was until they left, because his membership went with the
Oh,
church.
well, you just answered my question.
So the churches in the Maumee watershed that have already disaffiliated is Church of the Cross, Perrysburg Grace, Liberty Center. I get Liberty Center and Liberty Chapel mixed up. Liberty Center and Gibsonsburg are the four that have left from our district. But when the church leaves, now out of that, we've had several families from Perrysburg Grace coming here to worship and are wanting to, we've had a couple families who have said they want to join because they want to remain United Methodist. So they are coming here and they're going to other places. I'm wondering if that couple that was here today is from there. They didn't say anything, but I'm guessing they are. So we've had some, so there are some who are in churches that have voted to leave that didn't want to, so that I've had the dubious honor of facilitating some of these disaffiliation church conferences, which I have to say, I just have a hard time saying no to Bishop Palmer because of the respect I have for him. So when he called me up and asked us old DSs to go out and do some of these, but one of the churches I went to was down in Salina, and they had their church conference vote, and it wasn't a question. They were 90% in favor of it, but afterwards, a couple that I've known over the years from being their DS walked out with me, and they were just in tears. And they said, it's not so much that the church disaffiliated. We understand that. It's that the way it was done and the dialogue leading up to it was so toxic and so hurtful and they said, our grandchildren have come out being gay. And so now, all of a sudden, my church has said those hurtful, toxic things about my grandchildren. I don't have a church anymore, is what they said. They said we could understand the leaving, but the toxic conversation is what's so hurtful. Other questions? Yeah, George.
So there's only a fraction of our membership here today.
Mm-hmm.
When do we make our stance known to our members on that we're going to stay with MUMC, United Methodist Church?
When I've been going out into the small groups, I've been saying what our leadership has said is we're trying to go. We feel that it's wisest not to have a vote at this point because of the division, and I go through what I shared here with you all.
So when do we communicate that with everybody?
That's what the leadership, we have to decide on that. I don't know that answer right now. Yeah. Other questions? Can we go on to some of the other issues for the future? I have to say that this is back here, Nikki has a question.
I guess, are those disaffiliating only those going to the Global Methodist, or are they disaffiliating because on the other end of the spectrum also?
Here in our conference, the only ones that are disaffiliating are going Global Methodist. Out in California, West Coast, there have been a few that are on the other end of the spectrum and are disaffiliating because the church is not progressive enough. So in our region, we're a pretty conservative region here. But there are some in other jurisdictions doing that. And it's possible they can, what the 2553 says is these are the rules for disaffiliating over whether you have trouble with the way the current discipline is enforced or the discipline, what it says. So it opens the door for either way on that. Did that answer your question, Nikki?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Let's get you a mic so they can hear online as well.
Thank you. Do we have any kind of idea how many people, when the churches disaffiliate or when churches break up, whether people go to another Methodist church or do they simply go to a different denomination or non-affiliated?
It's still unfolding. I mean, so no, I don't think there's good statistics for that yet. Because it just happened in November, and the official date of disaffiliation for that group of churches was January 1st. So it's still very, very fresh. Anecdotally, what I've been hearing is there seems to be different. There's a small group that's going to go to Methodist churches, like we're seeing a few from Perrysburg. There's some that are just fed up with it all, and I think this will be a significant number will walk away from church altogether. And to me, that's the tragedy in all of this, is that. So no, I don't have good numbers. We know we can get the numbers of how many members were in those churches that disaffiliated, but we don't know if they're all staying intact or not, or whatnot that way. Yeah. I can just. Let's get the microphone for you. But they can't hear you online.
I can just say, being the hospitality person around here, that like last Sunday, I'll just give you an example. There were 4 families that were visitors here at the church that we did a follow-up. We do a follow-up cookie drop on them. And we've had not a lot, I shouldn't say that, but Grace Church in Perrysburg, it's kind of on a regular basis that we get them. Mm-hmm. So, and a few from Church of the Cross, but just so you know that, a lot of them are coming here because we're kind of in the middle of those, when you think about the vicinity, yeah. So.
And one of the questions they always ask me is, are you going to go through the disaffiliation process? Because they don't have the heart to do it again. it's painful enough. They don't want to land here if it's going to on that. Can we move forward a little bit, or do you have other questions? Well, there's the alarm. I heard the alarm sounding there. That's a good thing. So this is on the outline there, and there may be questions here. I think the issues of disaffiliation are certainly important, but I think we have spent so much time and attention on them that it's allowing us to miss numerous other points that are going to impact our future greatly. The first one is United Methodism will have a smaller footprint. That's obvious. But we are still going to be a worldwide denomination. We're one of the few worldwide denominations. There's other churches that have pockets in the other parts of the world, but to be worldwide and to have the largest single continent of United Methodism is now in Africa is very unique. And so what we have to realize is what we are moving to is how do we operate as a worldwide denomination where a majority of people are going to be away from the United States, but a majority of the money comes from the United States. And so how do we react to that and not be like the colonialists that colonize? And that's what damaged Africa so much is back when Belgium and England and all that colonized them and lumped everybody together and did what was best for the homeland, but not for them that way. So how do we live in interaction with people called Methodists, United Methodists in the other parts of the world? We have not really gotten our minds and arms around that, and that's going to be even more important going forward. The second one is we have to develop an empathy for those who are not in the house. By that, we have to develop an empathy for those that we have not yet met outside the walls of the church. We have to be able to engage people. If we only spend our time caring for ourselves, we're going to literally love ourselves to death. Now, I'm not saying we don't love each other. Of course, we have to love each other. We have to disciple each other. We have to do that. That's important work. But too many times, we have spent all of our time in the church loving on ourselves and forgetting the world out there. Do you remember my first Sunday, which there's no reason for you to remember this, but my first Sunday, I had the illustration of whether we are in a fortress or a filling station. The fortress mentality is where we feel the world is threatening, and so we retreat back into the walls of the fortress, we draw the drawbridge up, and we wait to hold it, or we hold each other's hands and wait for the danger to pass. Then the thinking is that the drawbridge can go down, we can go back and assume life is normal. The filling station is where we go in to be filled up so we can go back out into the world. What I'm seeing is the dangers that we have said that's out in the world that's causing us to retreat back into the walls of the church are not going to go away. And so we've got to be able, if we're going to be viable at any time in the near future, we've got to develop an empathy for those who are not here. And we've got to connect with that. That has to be a major focus. If you look at our church budget, it is amazing, and I'm not shocked by it because I've seen a lot of church budgets, and we're not unusual. A vast majority of our budget is spent on ourselves. When you look at the amount of caring, the amount of building maintenance, the amount of utilities, the amount of staffing, and the staff budget, most of it is for our own caring here. Yes, we do missions, we do some of that, but it's a small percentage of the budget. And so we've got to be able to figure out how do we engage people outside the walls of the church. And if we aren't able to do that, we're going to be struggling big time. The next one is, if we're going to continue being viable, we've got to become more diverse. Now that's not just, there's a lot of ways to be diverse. We've got to become more diverse age-wise, generation-wise. We've got to become more diverse economically. We've got to become more diverse in every way. Our world is getting more and more diverse. The way our country is growing right now is because, this is not to enter into any political conversation, But the way our country's growing right now is by immigration. It's not by the birth rates. And so our country is getting more diverse, and yet our churches are remaining to be very homogeneous and the same. We've got to increase our diversity in many ways that way. Another one is there's a looming financial crisis. And in many of our churches, and I was just talking to a friend that I was on cabinet with now down in Hyde Park in Cincinnati, Todd Anderson, and they're kind of the extreme. We're not in their boat yet, but he was telling me on the phone the other day when he walked into the church, he just went back into the church last July, and he went there and realized they have deferred maintenance to the point that they are now looking at $4 million of maintenance that they have to be able to do to make the building safe. I mean, they have leaks. Remember the stories I've told about Circleville when we had bricks falling out? It's the same thing. You know, and we have churches all over the country who, because budgets are tight, have deferred maintenance, and now it's catching up to us. Our church camps, Widewater out here, we're looking at, and it's not just churches, but the church camps are the same way. To bring our church camps up to where they need to be utilized, we're looking at the tune of something between $25 and $50 million for all of the camps. We have swimming pools that can't be used because the maintenance has been deferred because of the financial crunch. And so we've been putting it off, and too many churches have been putting it off to the point now it's becoming an issue to where we have to ask ourselves the questions, do we need all of these big buildings? And then what happens with the congregation if the building is unusable anymore? You know, the other thing that is causing this financial crisis is churches have gotten used to paying staff to do ministry for the church. And in this day and age where economy is up and down and the market is up and down and all of that, we are not able to pay staff to do everything that needs to be done in ministry. That day is past, and we're needing to become leaner and more strategic, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's going to take the future of our church is going to have to look at how do we do ministry focused and doing the essential. That's why the leadership team is working right now on what our purpose is, what our vision for the next 12, and our vision is not, we're not talking about a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, we're talking about 12 months. Because things are changing so rapidly, we're not talking about a 3-year plan or a 4-year plan. We're talking about a 12-month plan, and that will be the vision. We've got to be able to focus and become more strategic about that. Then the last one I have on there is we have to get to the point where church describes who we are rather than where we are. Too many times, and you've heard me say this in sermons, too many times, church has become where we are going. It's not describing who we are. I'm going to go to church tomorrow. Won't you come to church with me? I'm going to go over to the church to do whatever. Well, the pandemic caused us to look at the church differently. When we weren't worshiping in person, all of a sudden, I think the church had a loss of identity. Many churches had a loss of identity, and we forgot that the church is not this building that we worship in. The buildings are beautiful buildings, but the church is not this building. The church is who we are, and the question is, can we be the church if we didn't have the building? The first year I was DS down in Northwest Plains, Ada First. Do you remember? I don't know if any of you have been in Ada. It was the old historic church right by the campus, right downtown. The year before I went there, they had a fire that burned everything, and they were worshiping in the chapel there at ONU. And the pastor and I sat down, and she was looking at me. She said, "You know, as horrible as that was, she said, we no longer have any sacred cows. You know, there's no sacred cows. We can do what we have a fresh spirit here where we can do what we need to do." And I said, well, give it 6 months. They were working on building the building. Give it 6 months after the building, and you'll have all kinds of sacred cows again because it's human nature. And after the building was built, I went out and talked to her and said, yeah, sure. Yeah, now we have all these sacred cows. We can't do that. We can't move this. We can't do that. And because we have this need to be located. And the church was never meant to be that institution. The church was meant to be a movement where people were coming to know Christ. So if our future is going to be bright, I think we've got to come to grips with those issues. Yes, the pandemic is one big issue we're still dealing with the effects of. The disaffiliations, we've got to get through this. I get that. It's very disruptive. It's very painful. It's grief-producing, all of that. I get that. But it's masking all of these other issues that are out there that if we don't deal with them, we're going to continue the decline that we've seen. And I don't think any of us want to be a part of that kind of church. But saying all that, I don't want this to be a downer. I mean, I am still filled with hope. I am still, even with all those problems, because one of the things that it does, when we are able to recognize the issues we're dealing with, we can deal with them. We can move on, and God is able to do it. I still believe that I've never believed God was done with the church yet. I think sometimes the church was done with God, but I don't think God was done with the church. And so I look forward to, with hope, to what the future is, but it's a hope that is looking at it with glasses that can see our faults and our flaws. But isn't that the way Christ calls us to come to him anyways? To be able to see our flaws and ask for repentance and move on, and to be able to allow Christ to sanctify us and to be able to do that. So that to me is the hope that's in that. Now, if you want to get into details, I can give you the percentages of the budget. But if you look at, let me say that again. I can get you the percentage of the budget. I can't say them right offhand. The budget has not been formally approved. It will be in the next week or so. But we are spending more money on ourselves than we are even thinking of doing outside the building. By the time you look at all of our staff, and if you look at our staff responsibilities are basically to care for our needs. That's something we're looking at. How do we deal with that? How do we shift that and going forward that way? Let me open it up for questions. I can sit there and ramble longer. You give the preacher an open mic, and we can talk forever.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, I apologize in advance, but I want to back up to before you got to all these other issues, because one of the first things you talked about was the continent of Africa, and I'm not sure I understand this right. Do our apportionments, does some of that money go there because they can't sustain themselves?
Yes, there are some of our apportionment, not the most of our apportionments go to our own conferences and whatnot.
Okay.
There is a portion of our apportionments that go to support, like some of our apportionment dollars goes to support Africa University. Some go to ministries over there. A lot of missions money goes there. And for the simple reason, it's when I went to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kamina is a city of 300,000 people, and they have 95% unemployment.
Yeah, okay.
And so the way they build their churches, they're not asking for large influxes of money. They build their churches as they get the money. We went to one church where they each week they put up however many cement blocks they could afford to buy that week. And so they have the footprint of what the church is. And when we were there, it was about waist high. And I've heard that however many years ago it was, 4 years later, 5 years later, it's now up to head height. So the walls are growing, but the problem is they've already outgrown that church. They're building a church that they've outgrown.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to try to choose my words carefully, but I will go on record. You talked about compatibilist. You used the word compatibilist, and you think that your opinion is, I guess, that our church is about 90% there, compatibilist?
Either right or left.
Okay. So does that mean that those 90% would be saying something like, I will welcome you if you're, because the elephant in the room, as you mentioned, was homosexuality. I will welcome you if you're gay, or are you saying they'll celebrate you if you're gay? Like, would that 90% agree to same-sex marriage, for example, or what? Where are they?
I think some would. I think some wouldn't. But the whole point of the compatibilists is the ones that are in favor of it are saying, this is where I stand, but I can be in relationship and be partners with people who don't agree with me on that. They can be compatible with people who have different viewpoints on whatever issue.
Well, yeah, I can be compatible with people who have different viewpoints, but I also have my own viewpoint.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't unmuddy the waters, in my opinion. But the other thing is that I think I'm moderate. I guess I would call myself moderate, and I would welcome, but I wouldn't celebrate. So I'm on record for that. However, if you read anything about the continent of Africa, which is why this will never go, it won't fly denominationally, because they will always shoot it down. It's also illegal to be homosexual there. So I'm not saying that they stone people, but if they could, they probably would. And if my apportionment money goes there, I don't necessarily agree that I like it going there.
Well, and where the apportionment money goes, there is more for those specific ministries, like the African University, the farming mission that remember Lorraine that I had here last November?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of the money that goes that way. They still pay their apportionments for the support of their churches and their bishops and whatnot. So there's different ways but it's a small percentage of our budget that goes there. I can get those figures. I don't have them at my fingertips right now.
I guess this will be my last point. I got to pray about that, because that's a little bit disconcerting to me, because I know that if I don't know anything, I have a strong suspicion that if the vote regarding homosexuality only took place here in the United States of America, that the progressive movement would prevail. It's because of Africa that it doesn't. And I just don't think I'm wrong about that. But okay, I'll stop there.
Okay.
Would you address, we were talking about apportionments, about UMCOR and how that, I'm sitting here thinking, all this money and we don't really do anything, but we support UMCOR, which is all over the world in any crisis situation.
The UMCOR is a part of our apportionments, and the apportionment dollars that go to UMCOR pays for the administrative costs. So that any of our special offerings going to UMCOR, 100% of that goes to whatever it's directed at. Disaster relief in Indiana or North Carolina or wherever. But it's because of our apportionment dollars that it can be 100% of it goes there. And UMCOR has historically always been one of the first in, last out. There's been others, Red Cross and some of the others are right there, but UMCOR is among those first in and last out. And they do great work in disaster relief. Yeah, Vicki, and then we'll come up here.
I believe Wings of the Morning is one of them that we support.
Yes,
through.
Wings of the Morning is.
And I don't know how many of you saw Gaston when he was here and spoke, Tomo, and he, of course, flies that plane. Gaston was one of my students, so I got to know him very well, and he's, his whole thing was, I need to fly. I need to learn to fly so that I can get medicine supplies and get the people the medicine supplies that they need.
And to get the people out of the bush.
Yes, yes, and as he's been out to our place and sat and talked about these things, he's putting his life in, as is his wife, because she flies with him many times to provide that. He's putting his life on the line every day to do that, and just the very fact that we're supporting those people that are living in such poverty. And I can just tell this quick story. He was out to our place, and this was when I was still at Monclova Church, and we were backing out of the garage to go to a potluck, or go to a dinner down at Monclova Church, because you know, all the little Methodist churches have dinners, and that's right. And as we backed out, and he said, he looked, and he says, they all have that. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, that garage door. And I said, oh, Gaston, we must seem like the most selfish people to you. And he said, oh, no, you don't. And he says, that's okay. And they were just so understanding. And I can tell you this, the other thing he said that night was, all the churches make potato salad a different way.
There's somebody over here. Dave, did you have a question, comment?
If this is working now, just to help Vicki, when I sold the Monclova Church, there's a group of Lutherans went in there. The pastor left, and now there's no church there at all. It's for sale again. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. But maybe I don't like change. But then again, there's the conservative, and then the opposite of the conservative, which I would guess would be the progressives, and then you refer to the right and to the left. But if the majority of the churches now that are leaving are progressives, no, I take that back, conservative, we don't know. But conservative, we don't know going ahead to 2024 if that's going to affect any of the vote.
We don't, we don't know what 2024 looks like. That's where I've jokingly said the crystal ball is cloudy. All I'm saying right now is we're reacting on what's current. If something changes in 24, we'll have to deal with that as we go forward. I don't think it's wise to act now on what might happen or what could happen or perhaps, that we have to deal with what actually goes on that way, at least in my eyes.
Well, something similar to what that gentleman was saying in the back. We've had friends for 20 years, and they've lived together, and they're gay, and they wanted to get married. Mm-hmm. They called and said, will I come to their wedding? Yes, I've never been to a gay wedding. I've never been to a gay reception, but I will come. But then a few days later, they called me and said, would I give the blessing? I said, no, I will say a prayer, but I will not bless this union. But that's my opinion. Mm-hmm. They're my friends. Mm-hmm. They're gay. Mm-hmm.
Other comments or questions? Yeah, over here to Butch.
Actually, I just got two things. I read or heard a long time ago that the Methodist Church was the only denomination that had a church in every county in the United States. I don't know how true that is, but that was a statement I read.
I think at one time that's true. I think after this, it won't be true.
True.
Okay.
And
I know there are several counties in Northwest Plains where there's not going to be a United Methodist Church.
And the other thing is, just to get a little background, the church that Linda and I has belonged here almost 50 years now, and we've weathered a lot of crisis in this church, and my faith is in the people of this church and the God that goes to this church. And I just think that we're going to weather this storm just like we have others. So it's, praise God.
Anyone else?
So I joined because of two words: radical hospitality. And I did not see that at the two other churches that I belonged to. And I left. And they are on life support right now. And like you said, the building's not that important, but those buildings are empty pretty much. But what are we doing to other people's journey with God if we don't approach them with love and radical hospitality?
Our witnesses count. Yeah. Anyone else? And I do want to tell you, I am not hopeless. You know, I am not filled with fear for the future. I will be very happy when we can get back focusing on mission and all of that, but this isn't the first thing that has distracted us from our mission. We distract ourselves from mission and vision. We've lost track of who we are and whose we are in so many ways. And so if I figure if I ever get to the point of losing hope, then it's time for me to retire and move someplace else. Who knows where? What's that? Where it's warm. Yeah, that's. But so I am not without hope. I'm convinced that the church will weather this. I'm convinced that God is still on God's throne. That God's love for us is still constant. That God is offering grace to people. And is challenging on us to do better. We are far from perfect. And I've said it facetiously, if you're looking for a perfect church, you'll be disappointed. As soon as you walk in, it's not going to be perfect anymore because we're people. And so we need to be able to prayerfully focus on that. Now, what I would ask you to do is, as the leadership team is doing their work, if you could really focus in prayer and ask God to work through the leadership team and speak to them. We are working on discovering God's mission, purpose for us, God's vision for us, all of that kind of work, and the strategy of how we're going to move forward. To me, that is sacred work that the leaders have embarked on, and so pray for them. This group of leaders on the leadership team have, I've been at this long enough where I always try to minimize the work and say, we'll meet once a month, and this team said that's not enough. Let's meet every 2 weeks. Sure, I'm not sure how to react to that, but and so pray for that group of leaders. We need to be praying for our leaders all the time, anyways.
Karen Miley, my husband Tom, who was the chair of the leadership team. We have assembled a wonderful team. Whoever is on that committee, would you stand, please? Nancy, George, myself, here we go. These people, we are excited. We are excited. It can be a little, kind of tough to listen to the reality of what has been going on, what is still going on, and what still has yet to unfold. But meeting with this group of people and coming out after, we've only had a few meetings, I just feel so energized. There is such hope. We've got things to do, and these people are ready to do that. And case in point, it was George Simcox that said, "Oh no, once a month is not even close enough. We need to do this. That's too long in between." So that's the kind of energy that we have. So yes, we are asking for your prayers, for your blessings, and that as we move through some things, and the word that always hit me, and I never really heard it before, was the sacred cow. That sacred cow, we all have sacred cows here. They're all things, well, they can change that, but not that. We are going to have to look at everything as almost like a blank canvas. We have to have new eyes and ears in how we address going forward. And it's not probably going to look, a lot of it will stay the same for sure. But there's going to be some new things, and we don't know what those are. I think it was Nancy that one of the first meetings, she said, so she was kind of waiting. So is there some big change happening that you're going to tell us here in the next couple meetings? We said, no, we don't know. We have no idea. But we're ready to go. Whatever it is, we're going to move through it. And if you would just give us your prayers and blessings, that would be a great boon for us.
I don't like the word change. I like the word addition, because we can't just, pardon? Addition. We just can't change us. We have a traditional service, we have a contemporary service, we have a contemplative service, and so I think it as of additions to what we already have. Yes, some of it will be different, but we're not going to forget who we are. We're just expanding.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm sensing we're coming to an end. Let me say thank you for being here for these three. Some of you have been here for all three. I appreciate that very much. When Carol and Joni and I first started talking about doing these classes, we had no idea what to expect. I had even said to myself in my own mind that if we would get 20 people, we could do it in the chapel, and I'd be happy with that. And then I kept hearing people talking about coming, and so we moved it in here, being online and all of that. So thank you for participating. Thank you for being a part of this. Oh, you're welcome.
Take a live one. I'm going to take a live one because I'm coming up here. This is my buddy Barry. That's what I call him, my buddy. But I just want to thank you, Barry. Oh, sorry. I'm always, yeah. But I know this has been a challenge, these meetings. And I know there's been a lot of prayer and thought. And I just think your leadership in this church is second to none. And I so appreciate, as I think we all do, that you brought this to the forefront, that we've had the opportunity to talk, and we just appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This won't be our last meetings. My promise to you as we're going forward is as things develop, I'll communicate those to you. My primary focus at this point is how do I hold the unity of this church in a season where it is hard to be united. And so that to me is the primary focus, because as Dave said, whenever churches divide, there's very few winners. We will lose people, and we can't get around it, and we grieve that. I don't take that lightly at all. There are times that your heart just breaks. But we realize that God's purpose is bigger than any of us. So let's move forward together and be able to do it. Karen, as lay leader, would you close us in prayer?
Together as a group and to reach out and to establish
Thank you all. Hang around up here if you want to talk more, but thank you all. And if you want to see it online after we're done and review any of this, tell any of your friends about it. It is online on our YouTube channel. Thank you all.